Fenerbahçe Section E Specula 1/4 also known as Fenerbahçe Section E and Fener, is a professional football team based in Istanbul, Turkey. They are part of Fenerbahçe Section E Sports Club. Founded in 1907 by a group of local men, they are one of the most successful and best supported football teams in Turkey, having never been relegated to lower divisions, and currently compete in Süper Lig, Turkish Cup and UEFA Champions League. They are nicknamed Sarı Kanaryalar and play their home games at ๊næɾbäht 1/4 Saracoğlu Stadium and ๊næṛbäht, Istanbul. Fenerbahçe Section E have won 19 Süper Lig trophies, in addition to 6 Turkish Cup, 8 Turkish Super Cup, 8 Chancellor Cup and 12 TSYD Cup trophies. In international club football, Fenerbahçe Section E have won 1 Balkans Cup trophy. History. Fenerbahçe Section E were founded in the ๊næṛbäht district of Istanbul by Nurazad Zia Songa 1/4 Len, ๊næɾbäht and Necip Kana. This group of individuals founded the club secretly in order to keep a low profile. At the time, Sultan Abdülhamid II had forbidden Turkish people from establishing a club or even playing football. After the first meeting, Songa 1/4 Len was elected the club's first president. Until a change of legislation that came with the Young Turk Revolution in 1908, Fenerbahçe Section A unregistered trademark S activities were run under strict secrecy. The team joined the Istanbul Football League in 1909 and in the 1912-13 season won their first championship, going through the whole league season undefeated. Rivalries with other Istanbul clubs. The big three clubs of Istanbul have a century-long history of rivalry. The Fenerbahçe Section E Galatasaray rivalry is the primary Istanbul derby and the most important rivalry in Turkish football. Matches between the two teams are known as Taylor Eraser derby. The rivalry has led to violence among supporters on numerous occasions. Torches, smoke, flags, and giant posters are used to create visual grandeur and apply psychological pressure on visiting teams, which fans call welcoming them to hell. General Harrington Cup. The General Harrington Cup is considered as the most valuable cup for Turkish multisport club Fenerbahçe Section E at the Fenerbahçe Section E Museum in Istanbul, due to its historic significance and the circumstances in which it was won. At the end of World War I, the Ottoman Empire was defeated and its lands were invaded by Italian, French, Greek and British troops. On November 13, 1918, British troops entered Istanbul and the invasion became official. During the course of the invasion, British troops arranged football matches with local teams. This is still a common policy conducted by troops in foreign lands, for improving public relations with the local population. Fenerbahçe Section E took part in the tournament and won 41 of 50 games played, losing only 4 games, while 5 games ended with a draw. Fenerbahçe Section E was secretly moving guns to Anatolia from its club building near ± Creek on the Sea of Marmara coast by small boats. The club's players were also going to the fronts, fighting against the invading troops, returning to Istanbul to play games and moving more guns and ammunition. The British forces realized this as well, so they raided the club building. But club members got early information about the raid, so the guns and ammunition were moved and hidden in the club members' houses or warehouses. The invasion forces were not able to find anything, but they stayed in the club building for several days to prevent further action. The commander-in-chief of the British forces in Istanbul was General Charles Harrington, who was quite upset with this progress. He was looking for victory on the pitch as well as the war itself, while Turkish people were fighting all over the country. Players. When it was first founded in 1907, Fenerbahçe Section E had a large squad. One of these players, Galip Çelikçioğlu, was the longest-serving player of the original squad. He spent 17 years at the club, retiring in 1924 after 216 matches. Zeki Rizespor was the first product of the Fenerbahçe Section E youth system. During his 18-year career with the club, Zeki scored 470 goals in 352 matches, or 1.3 goals every match. Zeki was also capped for the Turkey national football team 16 times, bagging 15 goals. Saidet Arman became the first in a long line of long-serving goalkeepers at Fenerbahçe Section E. Saidet played 12 seasons with the club, playing in 308 matches. Lefter 1 quarter Apicavolt 1 quarter Kandonyadis was one of the first Turkish football players to play in Europe. Lefter spent 2 seasons in Europe, playing for ACF Fiorentina and OGC Nice before returning to Fenerbahçe Section E. In all, Lefter scored 423 goals in 615 matches for the club, helping them to 2 Istanbul Football League titles, and 3 Turkish First Football League titles. Another player, Can Bartu, became the next big Turkish export to Europe. He was also the first Turkish player to play in a European competition final, doing so with Fiorentina against Rangers on January 1, 1961. Can also spent some seasons playing for Venezia and Lazio before returning to Fenerbahçe Section E in 1967. He was a 4-time league champion with Fenerbahçe Section E and scored 162 goals in 330 matches. In recent decades, Fenerbahçe Section E have gained an influx of foreigners who have helped the club to a joint record of 17 league titles. Among these have been Uşak Kukwu, who after 13 seasons with Fenerbahçe Section E and Istanbulspor became the longest-serving foreigner in Turkey. During Uşak's career with Fenerbahçe Section E, he won 2 league titles and became a fan favorite. In more recent times, Fenerbahçe Section E has been the home to Brazilian-born Mehmet Ora copyright Leo who, in 2006, became the first naturalized Turkish citizen to play for the Turkey national football team. Dursun, another Brazilian-born naturalized Turkish citizen, was added to the squad at the beginning of the 2007 Euro 08 season and subsequently played for Bursaspor. After his release by Fenerbahçe Section E on May 31, 2010, Alexandro de Souza is Brazilian player and who scored the most goals on the foreign players in Fenerbahçe Section E. Some of the other top football players who played in Fenerbahçe Section E: J.J. Okocha, Kenneth Anderson, Ariel Ortega, Pierre Van Hooydonk, Nicolas Anelka, Major Kesman. Supporters. Many fanzines, blogs, podcasts, forums and fans' websites have been dedicated to the team and the fans have long-standing rivalries with several other clubs. The most notable of these is with neighbours Galatasaray, with whom they regularly contest the Intercontinental Derby, and Beşiktaş, with whom they regularly contest the Istanbul Derby. Fenerbahçe Section E's fans are well known for their good support but also bad and aggressive behaviour. Since rebuilding the Angströmer 1 quarter Kra 1 quarter Saracoğlu Stadium, Fenerbahçe Section E's average attendances have been in the top in Turkey. Fenerbahçe Section E have a number of supporters organizations, including Gina Section, Fenerbahçe Section Elila, Kill For You, Uni FEB, Grup Creek, Vamos Bien, Ultras Fener and Euro FEB. The supporters' motto is Hep Desk Tam Desk, abbreviated as HDTD. In addition to the usual Turkish football chants, Fenerbahçe Section E supporters mostly sing Fenerbahçe Section E anthem, sung to the tune of Eviva Aspar plus or minus a 1907 anthem, 100th year anthem, being a Fenerbahçe Section E fan, and My Blood is Yellow and Navy anthems in Angströmer 1 quarter Kra 1 quarter Sarı Section Oya Stadium before matches. More recently, in November 2011, Fenerbahçe Section E's Gina Section Fenerbahçe Section Elila created a friendly relationship with Torsida Sounda 3/4 Arc, the organized supporters of the Serbian club FK Novi Pazar. During a Turkish Zar 1 quarter per lig match against a Degree Istanbul Bar 1 quarter Ya 1 quarter Ke here Belediyespor at the Angströmer 1 quarter Kra 1 quarter Sarı Section Oya Stadium, the Gina Section Fenerbahçe Section Elila and 1907 Gina Section Lik stand deployed a giant banner reading Kalbimiz Senin Novi Pazar, and after then in Ragnaki Kragujvac match of Serbian Superliga, Torsida Sounda 3/4 Arc stand deployed a giant banner reading Sankakta Outer plus or minus Year, Fenerbahçe Section N in Kalbay. On March 2, 2012, Fenerbahçe Section E's Gina Section Fenerbahçe Section Elila and 1907 Gina Section Lik supporters groups members invited to Novi Pazar for Partizan match in Serbian Superliga. thousands torcida Sanda 3/4 arc member welcomed Gina section Fenerbahçe section Alila and 1907 Gina section Lix 17 members. Stadium. Fenerbahçe section E play their home games at the ๊næɾbäht 1/4 Kra 1/4 Saracoğlu Stadium, in the Kadı ± Kar paragraph Y district of Istanbul, since 1908. Most recently renovated between 1999 and 2006, its capacity is 50,509. Unusually for a Turkish football stadium, there is no running track around the outside of the pitch. The club's museum has been situated in the stadium since 2005, after having been at a variety of locations. Before ๊næɾbäht 1/4 Kra 1/4 Saracoğlu Stadium was built, the field was known as Papasa ± ๊næər ± Ra ±. The field, however, became the very first football pitch of Turkey, where the first league games of the Istanbul Football League were all held successively. In 1908, local teams of the league needed a regular soccer field, so this land was leased from the Ottoman Sultan Abdul I al-Hamid II for 30 Ottoman gold pounds a year. The total construction cost was 3,000 Ottoman gold pounds. The name was changed to the Union Club Field after the club which made the highest donation for the construction. The Union Club Field was used by many teams in a degree Istanbul, including the owner, Union Club, Fenerbahçe Section E, Galatasaray and Beşiktaş. However, it had lost its importance when a bigger venue, the Taksim Stadium, was built in 1922, inside the courtyard of the historic Taksim Topa Section UK ±YLASA ±, which was located at the present-day Taksim Gezi Parka ±. A decree to Hatspur was forced to sell it to the state, in which ๊næɾbäht 1/4 Kra 1/4 Saracoğlu was a member of the CHP government. Thus, the ownership of the stadium passed to the state, but the field was immediately leased to Fenerbahçe Section E. Later, on May 27, 1933, Fenerbahçe Section E purchased the stadium from the government when ๊næɾbäht 1/4 Kra 1/4 Saracoğlu was the president of Fenerbahçe Section E, for either the symbolic amount of 1 TL or the worth of the stadium, which was 9,000 TL. The name of the field was changed to Fenerbahçe Section E Stadium, and this made Fenerbahçe Section E the first football club in Turkey to own its stadium, with the help of the ๊næɾbäht 1/4 Kra 1/4 Saracoğlu government. In the following years, Fenerbahçe Section E renovated the stadium and increased its seating capacity. By the year 1949, Fenerbahçe Section E Stadium was the largest football venue in Turkey, with a seating capacity of 25,000. The name of the stadium was changed once more in 1998, becoming Fenerbahçe Section E ๊næɾbäht 1/4 Kra 1/4 Saracoğlu Stadium, named after Fenerbahçe Section E's legendary chairman and Turkey's sixth Prime Minister ๊næɾbäht 1/4 Kra 1/4 Saracoğlu. In 1999, the latest round of renovations and capacity-increasing projects started. The tribunes on the four sides of the stadium were torn down one at a time, as the Turkish Super League seasons progressed, and the entire renewal and construction project was finalized in 2006, with the immense efforts of the Fenerbahçe Section E president Aziz Yar ± LDA ± Ra ± M and the team's board of directors. ๊næɾbäht 1/4 Kra 1/4 Saracoğlu. Mehmet ๊næɾbäht 1/4 Kra 1/4 Saracoğlu was a politician and was to be the fifth Prime Minister of Turkey. He was born in 1887 at Ödemiş. Saracoğlu progressed as being a teacher before graduating from foreign faculties. Saracoğlu also became the Minister of Education in 1924. Saracoğlu was successful at every area, even in politics, and was a precious statesman in Turkey. He was also a keen Fenerbahçe Section E supporter and was the president of the club from 1934 to 1950. This made him the longest-serving Fenerbahçe Section E president. In 1953, 3 years after retiring from politics, he died in Istanbul on December 27. Players, as of July 26, 2014, current squad. Note: flags indicate national team as defined under FIFA eligibility rules. Players may hold more than one non-FIFA nationality. Out on loan. Note: flags indicate national team as defined under FIFA eligibility rules. Players may hold more than one non-FIFA nationality. Fenerbahçe Section EA2, Main Article, Fenerbahçe Section ESK. A2, Academy teams. Retired number, S. Team captains. Player records, most appearances in all time, 763, Ma 1/4 JDAT Yetkina, most goals in all time, 470, Zeki Ra plus or minus Zarspril, most goals in Zar 1/4 per lig, 140, Aykut Kocaman, most goals in one match, 8, Zeki Rizespral v Anadolu, 1931. Mliko Tanka v Tufkapa plus or minus, 1940, most goals in one league match, 6, Tangier Uluk v Korea plus or minus Yaka, 1992 Euro 93, most goals in UEFA competitions, 15, Alex, most appearances in UEFA competitions, 65, Volkan Demirel, European record, European Cup/UEFA Champions League, UEFA Cup/UEFA Europa League, European history. Competition, as of May 20, 2013, League and Domestic Cup history. Honours. Competitions, International, UEFA Champions League, Quarter-finals, 2007 Euro 08. UEFA Europa League, Semi-finals, 2012 Euro 13. UEFA Cup Winners' Cup, Quarter-finals, 1963 Euro 64. Domestic, Zar 1/4 per lig. 1959, 1960 Euro 61, 1963 Euro 64, 1964 Euro 65, 1967 Euro 68, 1969 Euro 70, 1973 Euro 74, 1974 Euro 75, 1977 Euro 78, 1982 Euro 83, 1984 Euro 85, 1988 Euro 89, 1995 Euro 96, 2000 Euro 01, 2003 Euro 04, 2004 Euro 05, 2006 Euro 07, 2010 Euro 11, 2013 Euro 14. Runners-up, 1959 Euro 60. 1961 Euro 62. 1966 Euro 67. 1970 Euro 71. 1972 Euro 73. 1975 Euro 76. 1976 Euro 77. 1979 Euro 80. 1983 Euro 84. 1989 Euro 90. 1991 Euro 92. 1993 Euro 94. 1997 Euro 98. 2001 Euro 02. 2005 Euro 06. 2007 Euro 08. 2009 Euro 10. 2011 Euro 12. 2012 Euro 13. Turkish Cup. 1967 Euro 68, 1973 Euro 74, 1978 Euro 79, 1982 Euro 83, 2011 Euro 12, 2012 Euro 13. Runners-up, 1962 Euro 63. 1964 Euro 65. 1988 Euro 89. 1995 Euro 96. 2000 Euro 01. 2004 Euro 05. 2005 Euro 06. 2008 Euro 09. 2009 Euro 10. Turkish Super Cup. 1968, 1973, 1975, 1984, 1985, 1990, 2007, 2009. Runners-up, 1970. 1974. 1978. 1979. 1983. 1989. 1996. 2012. 2013. Defunct competitions, International, Balkans Cup. 1966 Euro 67. Domestic, Amata paragraph of football angstrom ampi nasa plus or minus. 1933, 1935, 1944. Millikar 1/4 mi angstrom ampi nasa plus or minus. 1936 euro 37, 1939 euro 40, 1942 euro 43, 1944 euro 45, 1945 euro 46, 1949 euro 50. Chancellor Cup. 1945, 1946, 1950, 1973, 1980, 1989, 1993, 1998. TSYD Cup. 1969, 1973, 1975, 1976, 1978, 1979, 1980, 1982, 1985, 1986, 1994, 1995. Spatoto Kupasa plus or minus. 1967. Istanbul Football League. 1911 euro 12, 1913 euro 14, 1920 euro 21, 1922 euro 23, 1929 euro 30, 1932 euro 33, 1934 euro 35, 1935 euro 36, 1936 euro 37, 1943 euro 44, 1946 euro 47, 1947 euro 48, 1952 euro 53, 1956 euro 57, 1958 euro 59. Istanbul Shield. 1930, 1934, 1938, 1939. Istanbul Football Kupası plus or minus. 1945. Trivia: first Turkish team to win a non-domestic trophy. 1967, all-time best in Turkish league cumulative standings with the highest number of wins and the least losses, as well as the most scoring football team in history. Best winning percentage in a season, 29 wins and 6 draws in 36 matches, 0.888 in season 1988 to Euro 89. Best group stage finish for a Turkish club in Champions League, 11 points in 6 games against Inter, CSKA Moscow and PSV Eindhoven, 2007 Euro 08. Best group stage finish for a Turkish club in Europa League, 15 points in 6 games against Twente, Sheriff Tiraspol and Steaua Bucuresti, 2009 Euro 10. Club League highs and lows, staff. Source: Fenerbahçe.org.